chainsaw sharpening guides, tools, and etc. If you hang around this stuff long enough, you play around with it, eventually you end up with one or two of everything. Some of this I've bought, some of this I've been given. This is by no means all of it. There's been plenty more. But I thought I'd try and go through some of it. What works, what doesn't, what should you spend your money on, what to avoid. What all these guides are doing, these flat style guides or the roller guides or the 2-in-1s or anything like that, all these guides are trying to assist you with your file height control. They're trying to keep it at the correct height and consistently at the same height. It's important to have the right height so you form the right side plate angle on the outside and the top plate cutting angle on the inside. It's extremely important. What most people end up doing when they don't have a guide is they'll come in and they try and dig in really low with the file. It does absolutely nothing. You'll miss everything up the top that actually cuts wood. Gets you nowhere. All you end up doing is filing the bottom of the tooth here, and you'll never touch the corner or the top plate cutting angle, the parts that actually cut wood. Less common, but a few people do go in way too high. It is slightly harder to do. For me, I can't demonstrate it. So what a file holder will do for you, or a roller guide, or any of those style of file guides, is keep the file at the correct height for you. It eliminates you having to worry about that. As long as your depth gauge is correct, the file guide will sit at the right spot. It sits on top of the tooth and on top of the depth gauge. So you're left just to focus on your filing angle across the top, which you have lines to help guide you, and whatever angle you need to hold your file at. Alright, we might as well start with what I'd recommend to anyone starting out. You're just using a small saw with 3/8 low profile chain. Your best bet, in all honesty, is one of the 2-in-1 sharpeners. This one's a Stihl branded one. Got another one here that's a preferred. They're all manufactured by Preferred or Ferd. They're just, some of them are sold as Stihl branded. They also sell them under their own name as well. Don't buy one of the knockoffs. Some of them are pretty poor quality. Plus size of these things. If you just put it on top of your chain and hold it flat, you use these two end guides here to get you 30 degrees and push it across. It does a pretty good job on most semi-chisel chains. Full chisel chains can be a little hit and miss. It works well on some, not all. I've especially had issues with this one. This is a 404 guide. On Stihl RS, 46 RS, it is very, very aggressive. You know, with a chain that bounces and grabs and jumps, and it's not a good experience on it. It works well on 404 semi, just not 404 full chisel. Alright, next up, the Husqvarna roller guides. These things do an okay job, not brilliant, but I have seen people use them with a fair bit of success. I'm not that keen on them. They've never really worked on the chains that I've tried using them on. They do an acceptable job, but not great. I'd be more inclined to use a 2-in-1 file guides than one of these. Next we move into our flat style holders. These generally come in a kit. You need one for each size chain. These are all Stihl branded ones, so these two are. They work pretty well. There is better. I don't mind them. They will work. They will give you reasonable results. But there is better ways of doing this same thing. Now, while we're talking about the Stihl guides, I make this little flat thing. Sits on top of the bar. It's meant to hold you at 30 degrees. They're crap. Don't waste your time. Alright, next in the flat file guide section. These are made by Velour. These are the best ones that I've used. There's a few reasons for it. Mostly, they hold the file slightly lower, which I find helpful. The second good thing about them, on the end of the guide, I'm not sure how well I'll sharpen the camera, has a little section that's a different shape. It is bent down at 10 degrees. It can give most people a pretty decent idea of if you're filing with that 10 degree angle. I use these a lot when sharpening out and about. I am decent with a file, but being repeatedly consistent just using a file is actually really difficult. If you got 10 people who claim that they can file perfectly with just a file and a handle, and they'll tell you I can file it better than a new chain. For every 10 people who say that, at least probably 6 of them are going to give you back absolute shit. The chain you get back will be nothing but rubbish. You'll probably get 2 or 3 that can do an adequate job. It won't be brilliant, but it'll be alright. Realistically, out of every 10 people who have told me they're better freehand filing than with a guide, there might be one exception. There's one person who is exceptional at it. They have a lot of experience, they put a lot of time and a lot of effort into learning how to do it, and they can be consistent. For most of us, it's just not realistic. These tools are out there, they're cheap, they're small, they're easy to carry with you. It is worth it. It's just more consistent. These come, obviously you need a size for each size chain that you're running. The way they're marked, this is a 3/8 or 404 guide. It can do both. It'll accept a 5.2 or a 5.5mm file, and it works well with both. If you're someone who starts off with a 5.5 and works down to a 5.2 on a 404 or a 3/8 chain, good tool. If you're doing steel chaining, you like starting with a 5.2, does a brilliant job. The only issue you might run into with this, or some issues you will run into with this, I don't find the angle markings on the top very accurate. What it lists as 35, I find much closer to 30. If you file it at 30, if you use that guide for 30 degrees, I find you usually get about closer to 25. I don't know why. It does change a bit because you're using that tilt. That could be what I'm seeing, but it just happens with them. It's how it is. But all in all, pretty good. They're made of plastic, just got some metal in the back that supports them. Simple piece of equipment, hard to bend, hard to break, does a good job. Recommend them. All of them guides so far have been about controlling the file's height in the cutter, in the tooth. It is the single hardest part about sharpening chain, is controlling the height. That's what they're all made for. That's what they're trying to help you achieve, is to control that height. So you have a consistent height. If you have a consistent height, you'll have a consistent side plate angle, a consistent top plate cutting angle. The other part, you know, your 25 or your 30 degrees over the top, that's pretty simple. Most people can figure that out. All these guys will have a line to give you a bit of an indication as you're going across. What they're mostly doing for you is controlling the height. Once you're outside of that, if you feel confident enough to be able to control the height, which is a real challenge that most people cannot consistently do, that's when we move into some other things. This is another preferred product. This is a file handle. They make these little plastic bits that go on the end of it. All that does is give you this one gives you a 30 and a 25 degree line. Can help you lining it up. I don't know, I've used it a bit. I don't think it's much help, but they exist, they're out there, can be helpful. If you're a freehand filer, might get you a bit closer to the end goal. Husqvarna's plastic handles do a similar thing. They have a 25 and a 30 degree angle mark on the top. They can help you. I don't know. Not really big on it. Next up, these little magnetic file guides. These just give you, this has got 30 degrees on this side, 25 degree on that side. They're just some lines. You stick them to the outside of your bar. When you're filing, you can keep your file lined up with the marks. It can make you a bit more consistent on that angle. It's not the most important angle, but if you want to do it, go for it. Anyone who files chains is going to end up like this with boxes and boxes and files. There's plenty more of them here, that's for sure. Alright, these little 12 volt things, they go on a car battery. There's cordless ones now. I think I was given this. I don't know how old it is because it was made, it's a Grandberg branded one. But apparently it was made in Australia, so I'm guessing it's not exactly new. I've used these things maybe 2 or 3 times. If you know what you're doing with one and you know the angles that you want and all the other stuff, they can be effective. But like this, where you're just holding it with your hand, putting a little stone in it, maybe using the little cool grind crap, it's hard to be consistent because it can sort of tilt every which way. I wouldn't recommend them for a new person. Grandberg does make a bar mounted file jig for it that holds it in place. It probably works pretty well. The only thing I can say about it, if you've got any interest in putting a really smooth finish on a cutter, these things absolutely polish it. It comes out like a mirror. I don't think it makes much difference, but if that's something you're aiming for, one of these will give you the best result as far as that goes. Right, bar mounted Oregon file guide. This one's Oregon branded. There's heaps of others out there. These things work alright. They're pretty fiddly to set up and it takes a bit of time, but they are pretty consistent. They're not my favourite version of this. I very rarely use it. Maybe used it once in the last couple of years, I'd say. It's just, they do work. The gain isn't worth the effort. If you're really struggling with sharpening a chain and you just can't figure it out, something like this can be good. Probably set up a photo of this because I need to set it up on the bench. Still makes an FG2, which is a bench mounted file guide. The whole body of it is aluminium. It's extremely well made. The one I have was purchased by my dad in sometime in the 80s as far as I can figure out. It still works now. There's just some plastic bushes in the top where it slides through that can wear out. Apart from that, it delivers consistent, repeatable, very precise results, and they're honestly worth the money. If you're looking to do varying angles, different types of sharpening, and you want a very repeatable, reliable way of changing those angles, they are fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. Not cheap, not available everywhere, but definitely worth it. Well, we're talking sharpening, depth gauge tools. Still makes these ones. Progressive tool, very good. For some reason, not available in the US. Anywhere in the rest of the world, they're worth getting. You need a different one for each size chain. They're pretty good. The one provided on the front of the Husqvarna roller guides works pretty well. It makes these guides actually worth it. It's probably the thing that gets me over the line. I don't love using them, but at the end of the day, if you're someone who needs a guide when you're sharpening, you get a good file guide, a depth gauge guide, the file guide, the depth gauge tool, all in a small little package. What you can do with them, they're designed, the file size, the right file size, fits through them. If you're someone like me who uses a Husqvarna combi cans, you get this, you put a handle on it, you stick it down in the top of the fuel drum, between the fuel and the oil tank. It sits there. It's a small tool. It can do a lot for you. It's pretty decent. Don't love them as much as some of the other guides, but they do work. The flat steel depth gauge tools, hate it as a depth gauge tool. One of the greatest tools you can ever have for sharpening a chain. Just due to all these little windows on the top and the side, gives you the ability to check your work and make sure you've got the right result that you're looking for. Don't love it, but also love it. Strange situation. Next thing's up, filing on hard mode. These are all files, 4 different files for square filing chain. It is extremely difficult. Very few people can do it. I've practiced for a long time to be able to do it. It's an interesting skill to learn. You can do a lot with it once you know how to do it. There is no guides available to assist you with this. You are on your own. You have to line up the edge, the very edge of this file into the corner of the tooth, and you need to be precise. It is very difficult. Most people will never bother trying to do this. It's not recommended. It's an experience. Alright, one I forgot to include, but I think should be included in the file guide section. Still hex up. If you run 4 chisel 3/8 chain and you're not the most confident filer, this can be a very good option for you. The bottom of the file is completely smooth. Its intention is to sit in the bottom of the tooth. One of these little file guides, magnetic file guides, can be very helpful if you're not very confident with what you're doing. Stick it on the back of the tooth, so you got your 25 degrees there, so you can ensure that your file is lined up. All you need to do, stick the file in the bottom of the tooth, let it ride on the bottom of the gullet, and file away. You cannot go too high, you cannot go too low. It is a good option for people who are looking for something that is very easy to file when out and about.